Welcome to this Tactical Explainer. Today, we're going to break down exactly how Argentina and Spain navigated two vastly different semifinals to set up what is shaping up to be a truly historic 2026 World Cup final. We're going to look closely at the underlying data, the pivotal managerial decisions, and the on-pitch heroics that completely defined these matchups. So let's jump right in. Here is our game plan for today. We'll start by looking at how the final matchup is set. Then dissect England's late-game tactical collapse. From there, we'll analyze Argentina's chaotic, warrior-like comeback, unpack Spain's absolute defensive masterclass, and finally, wrap things up by looking at how these clashing styles set the stage for the final. Starting with Section 1, the final matchup is set, Spain versus Argentina. We are officially heading to New Jersey with a massive heavyweight clash secured. You've got an undefeated Spain taking on the battle-tested defending champions Argentina. But, to really understand what's going to happen in the final, we have to understand exactly how they got there. These two semifinals gave us an absolute masterclass in how mentality and tactics intertwine on the biggest stage imaginable. We saw two teams take completely different paths. Over in Atlanta, Argentina orchestrated this chaotic, highly emotional 2-1 comeback. Meanwhile, down in Dallas, Spain executed a cold, methodical, surgical 2-0 shutout. Moving on to Section 2, England's tactical collapse. From 1-0 up to a historic breakdown. Let's dive deep into our first match. England actually took a 1-0 lead against Argentina in the 55th minute, thanks to Anthony Gordon. But what followed was a catastrophic tactical collapse. This timeline perfectly illustrates the major turning point. So at the 55th minute mark, England goes up 1-0. Everything is looking great, right? But instead of pressing their advantage, manager Thomas Tuchel triggered what turned out to be a disastrous shift. At the 72nd mark, he moved England to a back five. The idea was to close gaps inside and be strong in the air against a barrage of crosses. Well, it completely backfired. It essentially invited intense, relentless pressure, which directly led to Enzo Fernandez's 85th minute equalizer. And ultimately, that pressure culminated in Lautaro Martinez scoring the crushing match winner deep into stoppage time at 90 plus 2 minutes. I really want you to let this staggering number sink in for a second. 4. That represents the total amount of successful passes England completed during a damning 19-minute stretch of the second half, right after their structural shift. I mean, think about that. Once they dropped into that back five, they became entirely passive. They literally couldn't keep the ball. And against a team like Argentina, you just cannot survive by surrendering possession and absorbing pressure for that long. It's a recipe for disaster. Looking at the underlying data, the tactical passivity becomes glaringly obvious. Argentina absolutely dominated the ball with 63% possession compared to England's 37%. Argentina also won 6 corners to England's 1, basically keeping the English pinned deep in their own half. And look at the fouls. Argentina committed 15 to England's 11. They fully embraced and won the physical battle across the pitch, completely disrupting any sort of rhythm England tried to establish. And the reality of the game was just brutal. England simply couldn't hold on to the ball or turn possession around, allowing Argentina to dictate the tempo entirely. The stats just don't lie here. When you stop trying to play and only try to defend, a world-class team is eventually going to break you down. Crucially, this wasn't some random accident. And in a rare moment of managerial honesty, because, let's face it, how often do managers actually fall on their own swords like this? Thomas Tuchel fully admitted his responsibility for the collapse. He noted that they decided to go to a back five because the gaps were too open. He mentioned that despite not making offensive substitutions, they were harshly punished for surrendering the midfield and dropping incredibly deep. He took the blame head-on, saying they became too passive and that the match changed completely. All right, let's look at Section 3, Argentina's relentless warrior comeback, smelling blood in Atlanta. We can't just talk about England's failure without giving massive credit to Argentina's incredible mental fortitude and their aggressive response. Manager Lionel Scaloni had a quote that reveals the absolute psychological bedrock of this team. He said, "When we're struggling and the opponent hesitates just a little, we smell blood and we go for it with everything we've got." They're warriors. They refuse to be weighed down by the intense pressure of a World Cup semifinal deficit. They didn't play with the fear of making a mistake. They played with a relentless, borderline scary desire to win. They still wanted the ball in those final 15 to 25 minutes. And the player who perfectly embodied that warrior spirit was Enzo Fernandez. Just look at these dominant midfield stats. He has a breathtaking engine that allowed him to cover over 11.12 kilometers on the pitch. That's massive. He was an absolute menace defensively, forcing 15 turnovers, and he completely pulled the strings offensively by completing 84 passes. It was his sheer willpower that eventually led to him scoring that 85th-minute equalizer that finally broke England's resistance. And, of course, capitalizing on all that midfield dominance was the maestro himself, Lionel Messi. Awarded the player of the match, Messi absolutely shredded England's low block. He managed 19 completed line breaks and picked up 2 crucial assists. But what's most impressive to me is the 22 receptions he had right between the midfield and defensive lines. England's passive structure basically just allowed Messi to find cozy little pockets of space all over the pitch, and he brutally punished them for it. Now, Section 4, Spain's dominant defensive masterclass, shutting down the French superstars. Let's completely shift gears and contrast that chaotic, emotional comeback we just talked about with the cold, calculated efficiency of Spain's 2-0 victory over France. Spain delivered an absolute tactical masterclass in Dallas. They moved methodically through a clear blueprint to completely nullify the pre-tournament favorites. First, they neutralized the massive threats of Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembélé with flawless, disciplined defending. Then, they struck early, taking the lead with a 22nd-minute Mikel Oyarzabal penalty. And finally, they sealed the game with a sweeping, beautiful team goal finished by Pedro Porro in the 50th minute. Now, the spark for Spain's methodical dominance actually came from a teenager. Lamine Yamal, playing just one day after his 19th birthday, made this wildly dynamic run that forced Lucas Digne to clip him inside the box, winning a crucial penalty. Oyarzabal stepped up and confidently smashed it past spot kick specialist Mike Rognan to give Spain a lead they would never let go of. Honestly, not a bad way to celebrate a birthday, right? On the flip side of this, France was completely suffocated. Kylian Mbappe was visibly frustrated out there, caught offside twice in quick succession as he desperately tried to get behind Spain's high line. Dembélé was super inaccurate, his passes into the final third kept proving way too heavy. Plus, their rhythm was shattered by an early yellow card to midfielder Adrien Rabiot, and they suffered a massive, massive blow when key defender William Saliba was forced off injured right at the 30-minute mark. France just couldn't find a single answer to Spain's setup. Pedro Porro, who calmly slotted home the second goal to seal the match and earn Player of the Match honors, summarized the clinical efficiency of Luis de la Fuente's side perfectly with this brilliantly simple quote: "It's a great night for us. No chaos, no panic, no dramatic comebacks required, just pure, unadulterated execution." And that brings us to our final section, Section 5, a clash of tactical styles, mentality versus method. As we look ahead to Sunday's final in New York and New Jersey, we are presented with a truly fascinating clash of two distinct tactical identities. The contrast in managerial mindsets across this tournament is stark. Where teams like England hesitated, retreated under pressure, became passive, and ultimately paid the price, Argentina's philosophy relies on an aggressive, completely fearless desire to possess the ball when the stakes are at their absolute highest. They're literal warriors who thrive when their backs are against the wall. But on the other side, you have Spain, a team built entirely on meticulous structure, calculated possession, and positional perfection. So what you should really take away from this explainer is that the ultimate question heading into this massive World Cup final is this: will Spain's methodical, structural perfection actually be enough to contain the sheer willpower and chaos of Scaloni's Argentina? Can a perfectly executed, by-the-book system withstand a team that smells blood and just flat-out refuses to lose? It is quite literally mentality versus method. And I, for one, absolutely cannot wait to find out. Thanks so much for joining me on this tactical journey, and enjoy the final.